Okay, this will be the Joseph Smith translation that was added to the end of chapter 14 in Genesis. And this is a very fascinating section here, so let us read this. Gives us starting verse 25. And Melchizedek lifted up his voice and blessed Abram. Now Melchizedek was a man of faith, who wrought righteousness, and when a child, he feared God, and stopped the mouths of lions, and quenched the violence of fire. And thus, having been approved of God, he was ordained an high priest after the order of the covenant which God made with Enoch, it being after the order of the Son of God, which order came not by man, nor the will of man, neither by father nor mother, neither by beginning of days nor end of years, but of God. And it was delivered unto men by the calling of his own voice, according to his own will, unto as many as believed on his name. Now, just quick note. Melchizedek obviously was a great man of great faith. He says, even as a child, feared God, stopped the mouths of lions, and quenched the violence of fire. So even as a young man, and it says a child, that could be, 8, 9 years old. It could also mean he was in his 20s. It's kind of debatable on these terminologies in the Bible, but as a young man, he had the faith to stop the mouths of lions and to quench fire. This, like Daniel in the lion's den, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And he was ordained, and I love the description of the priesthood there. It did not come by man, nor the will of man, neither by father nor mother. This priesthood is not inherited. The patriarchal order is. But the priesthood itself is given to those who are worthy of it. Regardless of ancestry, regardless of anything, God chooses and calls the worthy. Verse 30. For God, having sworn unto Enoch and unto his seed with an oath by himself, that everyone being ordained after this order and calling should have power by faith to break mountains, to divide the seas, to dry up waters, to turn them out of their course, to put at defiance the armies of nations, to divide the earth, to break every band, to stand in the presence of God, to do all things according to his will, according to his command, subdue principalities and powers, and this by the will of the Son of God, which was from before the foundation of the world. Note some of these things that the priesthood gives you power to do if you have the faith. Enoch, we know, he moved mountains. He turned rivers out of their course. Melchizedek obviously had a very similar faith. But there's one thing I think is very interesting here that it says, to put at defiance the armies of nations and to divide the earth. This seems to me to indicate that the dividing of the continents that occurred in the days of Peleg was not simply an act of God, but was an act of the priesthood. Possibly Peleg himself, probably Peleg, which is why he is the one that is referenced as in his days the earth was divided, because Shem is still alive, Heber is still alive, Noah is still alive when this happens. But it is in the days of Peleg, because he is the one that displayed the priesthood power to divide the earth, to split the continents. That is what I think this is alluding to. But, continuing, 32. And men having this faith, coming up unto this order of God, were translated and taken up into heaven. And now Melchizedek was a priest of this order, therefore he obtained peace in Salem, and was called the Prince of Peace. And his people wrought righteousness, and obtained heaven, and sought for the city of Enoch, which God had before taken, separating it from the earth, having reserved it unto the latter days, or the end of the world, and hath said and sworn with an oath that the heavens and the earth should come together, and the sons of God should be tried as by fire. And this Melchizedek, having thus established righteousness, was called the King of Heaven by his people, or in other words, the King of Peace. And he lifted up his voice, and he blessed Abram, and being the high priest and the keeper of the storehouse of God, him whom God had appointed to receive tithes for the poor. Wherefore Abram paid unto him tithes of all that he had, of all the riches which he possessed, which God had given him, more than that which he had need. And it came to pass that God blessed Abram, and gave unto him riches and honor, and lands for an everlasting possession, according to the covenant which he had made, and according to the blessing wherewith Melchizedek had blessed him. There's a lot of stuff here. No. Those who attain to the power of priesthood of Enoch are translated. We know that before the flood, many people were translated. We read here that Melchizedek, he had his city of Salem. He was a righteous man. His people dwelt in righteousness, and they sought after the city of Enoch. They sought this blessing, and they received it. The entire city of Salem was translated. Now, with the city of Enoch, it was the buildings, the land, everything was taken off the earth. With Salem, the people were brought up to join the city of Enoch. They sought for that city, and they joined it, leaving the building in the city behind, which later would become the city of Jerusalem. There's a reason that God chose that city as his center. It's because that's the city where Melchizedek was. Now you'll also note that Melchizedek was the high priest who was put over the tithes for the poor. In other words, he was the bishop. He was the presiding bishop in his day. That was his position. That was his office, his calling. That is why Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, not to anybody. He didn't pay tithes to Shem. He didn't pay tithes to Eber, even though they were the high priests. They were the leaders, the patriarchs of the day. Melchizedek was the bishop. He was the one who was called to oversee the tithing and the blessing the poor. Now it also states that Abraham paid his tithes of everything that he did not have need of. In other words, he didn't just pay 10%. He actually lived the law of consecration. He took what he needed. Said, this is what I need. I've got all these people that are dependent on me, that I'm ruling over. We're going to keep what we need to sustain ourselves, support ourselves in a comfortable life, and everything else, pay it to Melchizedek. And because of that, he was blessed. But he wasn't just blessed. It wasn't just God saying, hey, we're going to bless you. It was Melchizedek using his priesthood authority. In other words, in a sense, Abraham's patriarchal blessing came from Melchizedek. In a sense, it's something similar to that. It's not the actual, I don't think it was an actual patriarchal blessing, because I don't think Melchizedek was an actual patriarch. Not in that sense. So, but he was blessed by Melchizedek, who had the blessing, who had the power to give this kind of a blessing. He was the presiding bishopric. He was the presiding bishop. He had the power of the tithes, the power to bless temporally. That was his calling. It was to give temporal blessings. And he blessed Abraham with wealth and success. And God upheld the blessing. I find that addition that Joseph Smith added into that chapter fascinating and full of so many just great details of what the priesthood is and what it can do. But I'm going to leave that here. See you in the next one.